Scotland then looked to be on the final run. Into injury time, a Welsh handling error gave Chris Patterson the chance to leap. The video ref judged it a try. But Wales hadn't finished. Two fast tries in quick succession from Mark Taylor, and then Rhys Williams pulled back the points. But it was too little too late, a Scottish win by 30 points to 22. Now, there may be new regulations out on the Grand Prix grid, but there was no new front-runner in this morning's qualifying session in Melbourne. World champion Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello were fastest in the only flying lap now allowed in qualifying. It doesn't bode well for those fed up with Ferrari's dominance. Juan Pablo Montoya claimed third spot. Jenson Button was the fastest of the Brits. He's in 8th place, with David Coulthard 11th. So the same old story on tomorrow's starting grid, with both Ferraris on the front row. Heinz-Harald Frentzen Sauber lines up alongside Montoya behind, and a good start for Toyota with Olivier Panis in 5th and Jacques Villeneuve in the BAR in 6th. And lastly, to the Cricket World Cup, and New Zealand's big hitter Chris Cairns earned his half-century and contributed to a 6-wicket victory over co-host Zimbabwe. Set a respectable target of 253, victory for the Kiwis required a run rate of nearly 6 and over, which they achieved courtesy of this rather pedestrian boundary from Nathan Astle. It got him an unbeaten 102 and the Kiwis' first victory of their Super 6 campaign. That's the sport. Now back to Samira.
When we come back, tributes to the pop star Adam Faith, who died today. And thousands take to the streets of Britain once again to press home the anti-war message.
It's too late now. It's done. It's their problem. That's the price they said. But technically, it's theft, isn't it?
Back pain affects over 16 million people a year in the UK. Yet appropriate treatment could work wonders. In over 90% of cases, surgery is unnecessary. At Bupa, we have teams of highly experienced specialists dedicated to the assessment, treatment and care of your back. We have a range of ways to help straighten you out, from health checks to back clinics to hospital treatment. Whether or not you choose to become a Bupa member, call 0800 00 1010.
Welcome back. You're watching Channel 4 News, and we return to our main story, the increasing momentum towards war in Iraq. With the endgame seemingly being played out at the United Nations in New York, thousands of British demonstrators have once again taken to the streets to press the anti-war message. This time the protests were in towns across England. An estimated 10,000 people gathered in Manchester to voice their opposition to military action. With war possible as soon as next week, Tony Blair is under intense pressure from Labour MPs to hold a Commons vote before British troops are sent into action. Katie Razzle reports.
Manchester's turned to show its opposition to war. 10,000 people braving the rain, another reminder to the Prime Minister that his support for George Bush isn't going down well in the country. Ahead of a critical week for Mr Blair, there's anger here that the electorate is being ignored.
We don't believe that this is about human rights. This is about oil and it's about greed, and that's why we felt we needed to come out and bring our children with us.
Tony Blair is an idiot. He follows Bush like a dog. And, you know, and just George Bush is just, his leader goes, Tony, come here, boy. Tony, invade Iraq for me. That's all it is.
1, 2, 3, 4. Manchester against the wall. Manchester against the wall.
Manchester's councillors out too. The Labour Council's support for the rally putting it at odds with Mr Blair.
A large number of Labour Party members disagree with Tony Blair, and that's fine. It's a democratic Labour Party. And I would urge Labour Party members up and down the country, don't leave the Labour Party, set up Labour Against the War organisations like we've done in Manchester.
A Opinion polls show the government can only win the public round to military action with a second resolution in the United Nations. So this week's vote in New York is clearly crucial if Mr. Blair is to have a chance of convincing the electorate. But he's also risking further revolt within his party in Parliament. The government did promise a further vote in the Commons before any conflict begins, if possible. This weekend, some Labour MPs are talking about trying to force such a vote as soon as the UN makes its decision, likely on Tuesday. They say once a war has begun and British troops are in action, it will be difficult for them to vote against the government's line. And they claim that under intense pressure from their constituents, even more Labour MPs could rebel than the 122 who revolted last week.
Frankly, those of us who are opposed to it will, I think, insist that our voice is heard, that we have the opportunity to make it quite clear that the nation doesn't go along with the government. The nation certainly doesn't go along with the White House and the Pentagon.
We don't want no more.
There was also a demonstration in London to mark International Women's Day, led by 9-year-old Teresa Phillips. Women with disabilities, Iraqis, lesbians, single mothers and the odd man gathered to make their voices heard. This isn't a constituency Mr. Blair could ever easily convince of the justification for war. Many cut their teeth at Greenham Common.
One way the convoy was stopped with potatoes stuffed up the exhaust pipes. So watch out! You better watch out! We have our potatoes!
At rallies up and down the country, people are talking seriously about civil disobedience. Mr. Blair will be aware that he's more exposed politically than he's ever been.
Katie Razzle reporting. Well, just before we came on air, I spoke to the Foreign Office Minister, Mike O'Brien, and I asked him if he still believed a second UN resolution could be passed.
We still believe we can get a resolution. We're very conscious that there needs to be still some further discussion at the United Nations, and that's happening indeed as we speak over the weekend. So we still believe we will get a resolution. It's important that we also make the point nobody wants war. Britain is trying to deal with this in a way that we put maximum pressure on Saddam Hussein to comply with UN Resolution 1441. We don't want to have to use force. We only will use force if it's absolutely necessary. And so therefore we understand the concerns of some of the other countries, but we also have to recognise, and everyone accepts this, that Saddam Hussein still has not fully complied with 1441. He has not made a complete declaration of his chemical and biological weapons.
But you say that no one really wants to go to war if it can be avoided, but today President Bush has said that the latest move on the Al-Masood missiles is a willful charade, and there are reports out of Washington that they're talking about war as early as the 17th if the resolution doesn't get passed. Would we be going along with that?
Well, in terms of the Al-Masood missiles, somebody said to me when I was in Damascus during the week that Saddam Hussein deals with this whole process like what somebody described to me as a soup trader. He concedes only at the last moment as little as he possibly can. So on the Al-Masood missiles, it was clear that he had to concede these, so he's slowly allowing a number of them to be destroyed. So what we're seeing, and we've seen throughout this whole process, indeed we've seen for the last 12 years, is not compliance with UN resolutions, but giving a little bit here, a little bit there, just as much as he has to give, and no more. What we now need to do is say very clearly to Saddam Hussein, you must fully comply with UN resolutions now. You've had so long, 12 years, and indeed since the passage of 1441, was it 3 months? It really must now be the case that he complies, and that's why we've indicated that we want to see compliance by the 17th.
Well, you've got the situation now where here at home we've had another big anti-war demonstration, and there's evidence that a growing number of Labour MPs are pressing for a vote in the Commons if this second resolution doesn't get through before any British troops are committed for action. Would the government consider that?
We certainly want to have another vote in the House of Commons, and we've indicated as soon as a second resolution is dealt with, we will want to go back to the Commons and have a further vote. And our wish would then be to have a further debate in the Commons should it become clear that war is imminent. So we're absolutely conscious that there is going to be a new debate. In the Commons there will be a new vote, and indeed there will be an opportunity at least for a debate on Tuesday when there is a report by the Foreign Affairs Select Committee on terrorism, and so that will give an opportunity to talk about Iraq as well. But let me say that the government understands the concern in the country. It is right that we do. I talked today to my North Warwickshire Labour Party members who were concerned about the prospect of war, and it's right that people should be. The government is listening to people's concerns. It is listening to those who've been on marches. But we also have to explain why it is essential to ensure that we deal with this problem of weapons of mass destruction. Because if we don't draw the line here, then where else will we draw it?
The Foreign Affairs Minister, Mike O'Brien. Now, finally, the actor and pop star Adam Faith has died. He was 62 and suffered a heart attack at a hotel last night, just hours after appearing in a play in Stoke-on-Trent. Adam Faith was one of Britain's top pop stars in the 60s, alongside Cliff Richard and Billy Fury. Number ones included What Do You Want and Poor Me. Recently, he'd been thinking about singing again.
What do you want if you don't want money? What do you want if you don't want gold? Say what you want and I'll give it you, darling. Wish you wanted my love, baby.
I haven't sung in anger now for 30 odd years, and just recently I've started to think about doing a one-man show, doing a lot of the old songs.
You try to date another guy.
By the time he married Jackie Irving in 1967, he was acting, starring in Keith Waterhouse's classic TV series Budgie, and later in the film Stardust, and he'd amassed a small fortune in property. He embraced the money culture of the 80s, becoming a financial advisor and journalist. But his investment in a failed digital TV project, The Money Channel, 4 years ago, left him bankrupt, with reported losses of £32 million. Recently, he'd gone back to presenting on radio and acting in a TV sitcom and on stage.
Oh, he's a great guy. I mean, what you saw is really what he was. I mean, that's not the case with many celebrities. They are one thing to the public and another in their private lives. But he was what you see, that Jack's the lad, happy-go-lucky fellow, heartthrob to millions of women of all ages, and a mate and a pal to all the fellows.
On to the weather. Tonight, heavy rain will affect Western Ireland and Western and Northern Scotland, and other parts of Ireland and Scotland, and some western parts of Wales and England. There will be lighter rain. Tomorrow, rain will spread eastwards from Ireland and Scotland on Sunday to affect Wales and most of England, although the southeast will remain dry until the evening. In the west, it will turn showery later. It will stay mild and windy. And our main headline tonight, Chile has become the latest Security Council member to reject American calls for a March 17th deadline for Saddam to disarm, saying inspections should continue. We're back tomorrow at 7:30. Until then, from Sue and from me, that's Channel 4 News and Sport. Good evening.
The winner got a Nobel Prize for his discovery. Next, a series that tracks the race to discover the structure of the very substance of existence. DNA, the secret of life.
You can talk that talk, got to walk that walk. Baby, I've got my eyes on you. I ain't gonna stand no cheating, no sneaking and a peeping. But you'll be sorry, baby, if you do. Remember this song and you won't go wrong. But baby, I've got my eyes on you. You can be my baby, and I don't mean maybe, but we got to see eye to eye.
The new Fiat Stilo Multiwagon.
I'll be good to you.
In tomorrow's Sunday Express, celebrate the rites of spring with this wonderful classic CD collection of Spring Garden classics, featuring favourites by Vivaldi, Tchaikovsky, Beethoven, Handel and many more. Spring Garden classics, free inside tomorrow's Sunday Express.
Express delivery!
You can be
0% finance with 0% deposit is available across the whole Fiat range. Call 0800 721 7000.
The young of Burdest in Romania don't want to live like peasants anymore. They trade in their history and culture for the dream of a more prosperous life in the West. Is this where the dream ends and the reality begins? The Last Peasants, Sunday at 8 on 4.
Tracking the ever-changing image of the pop world's tiniest superstar, Kylie Entirely is at 8. Before that, we're back to evolutionary basics in the first of a 4-part series, DNA, the secret of life.